I welcome each of you here in this summit, and I thank you for celebrating your essence with us today.
Ladies and gentlemen, my honor and pleasure to present to everybody in the hero community, Dr. Raymond Cheng.
Well, thank you very much, Ms. Bryce. Welcome to be here, and it's my honor actually to be your guest.
Appreciate you saying yes again, Dr. Raymond. I know that you always make time for hero, and any time that you are given the chance to share your knowledge as a knowledge bearer, you always say yes. So thank you so much. It's an honor.
My pleasure.
Doc, it's an interesting afternoon because we will be talking about cultural differences, all right, and the impact of this as we transitioned, specifically the schools and the universities in the educational technology, adapting to this and everything. Now, I am just curious, why is this important for our schools to understand? Why such topic is important for our schools to understand?
Well, put it this way, if you look around the world, what happened right now with the COVID thing is that of course, different places do exhibit different cultures. But the thing is, if you look at culture, and if you look back into the cultural theories from, let's say, Gert Hofstede, you'll see large power distance communities and small power distance communities really performing very differently under COVID-19.
Yes.
For instance, if you look at places like China, where, try to imagine this, they are requiring basically everybody to install something that would track wherever you go, and record whatever you've done, record whoever you've met, and basically there's, I wouldn't say no privacy, but put it this way, is that this is something that the Western world would normally not do. But in times like these, I mean COVID-19, it really is important that we do have to have a way to track people. Well, we're trying to do that in Hong Kong as well. I mean, the Hong Kong government is trying to do that as well. But they are, I wouldn't say they're very much successful in that sense, because people in Hong Kong are still quite worried about being tracked. And because of that, we are still, we're having quite a number of confirmed cases every day. And if you look at it from this kind of a perspective, well, education, I guess we all wanted our face-to-face classes back as soon as possible. Now we're doing Zoom classes, just like the one that I'm doing right now with you. I mean, Zoom meetings, Zoom everything. I would rather shake hands with you in person and be talking with everybody. I mean, in a place where we can gather, meet, shake hands, well, things like that. But now we are forced to do the Zoom thing. Why? Because we can't contain that COVID thing. And if you look at that, when we have to fight this kind of a battle, we do need a very high power distance culture in order to fight that. And everybody would have to sort of give up a bit of the privacy just to let the scientists to be able to trace and track the virus. But right now, because of, various issues and people are not willing to do that, and look at what's happening in the UK and the US. Well, they're having huge numbers of confirmed cases, right? So it's sort of like a difficult question whether you want freedom, absolute privacy versus COVID-19. So what are you going to do? I mean, like in the schools, are you going to track each and every one of the students? And like in universities, they would say no. A lot of students would say no. A lot of professors would say no. And even for me, I would sort of hesitate. But when you try to think of it the other way around, are you going to let this grow? Even when we have the vaccine, it's going to take time. And the longer it's going to take, the more hurt is going to be there. I mean, for not just the society, but the whole world. So that's why we have to look at the culture, because it really boils down to how soon we can contain the virus in a way, and how soon we can go back to our normal lives.
Will there be a normal life like how we used to have?
Well, I think so.
Are we going back there? I mean, scaling back there, or maybe?
Well, put it this way. Those who've been through the Spanish flu back in the early 1917, they managed to get through. And look, we all sort of have the antibodies. I mean, with the flu. But the thing is, now we're going through the same thing. and we're experiencing the same kind of psychological barriers. Are we going to do that? Are we going to do that? But back then, there was no such thing as well, I wouldn't say no such thing, but we are not that concerned about privacy. So we're so disciplined, we don't mind being tracked, or if we have to report where we're going to go, it's okay. Right. Well, try and imagine this. A lot of people have kids, right? And try to ask yourself, it's probably a lot harder to track where your kid is right now with all these electronic gadgets, with all these social media stuff, than before when we were kids and our parents used to track where you've been to. And you are going to tell the truth, right? but now you don't know where they are. You can't tell. And they have all sorts of ways to hide themselves. Yet we have all the gadgets here, we have all the technology here. What is happening with us? I mean, is that a problem with the education? I guess so.
Right. Well, with complexities came the complication, and everything is happening around it, I think. Right? Anyway, I couldn't agree more, right? But I'm just curious, what and why do we have the cultural differences? Why would there be cultural differences in the adoption of technology? I need to understand this myself.
That's an interesting question. In fact, if you look at the way people look at technology, for those who are open to technology, they're totally okay with that. But let me give you an example. 1900. In 1900 China, and if you try to take a picture of somebody, they are going to freak out right away. They thought you were going to capture their soul. So you're going to leave them with just the shell without the soul. So after you take the picture, that person is going to have a bit of the soul taken away by that picture. It took him a long period of time just to relax in front of the picture, in front of the camera.
All right.
And by the way, if you've noticed, all these vintage pictures, well, of course, because of long exposure time, you have to look at that camera for like 15 minutes, just like that. So nobody's going to smile, right? If you have to take a picture for like 15 minutes and you can't move for 15 minutes, you are not going to smile. So if you look at that, you realize one thing is that it's really going to take time for people to adapt to a new technology in one culture. And if for another culture, when they have a difference in terms of the culture, they might adapt that a bit faster. And talking about adopting that kind of technology. Now, when we talk about technology, it does not necessarily have to be anything electronic or computer or software. It can be as simple as just a face mask. Well, try to imagine this. The first guy who invented the face mask was actually a new technology, right? So if you look at that back in time, try to imagine this. Well, in the early period of COVID, the West was sort of like being not exactly condemned, but people were talking about they're not wearing face masks. Whereas in the East, we're all wearing face masks. Well, probably because of SARS back in 2003. But if you look at it from another perspective, try to think of superheroes. For example, Batman, Green Lantern, who else? Robin, even Zorro. They all mask their eyes. They don't mask their mouth. Right? They don't mask their bottom half of the face. They mask their eyes. Whereas if you look at Korea and Japan, you look at ninjas, you look at community heroes in Korea, they mask their face. And in the West, if you mask your face, you're supposed to be the bandit, the bad guy. It's not just that you are sick. So they thought when people are sick, you mask your face, you mask your mouth. But it's also true that if you're a bandit, you mask your mouth as well, right? You go rob the train, you go rob the bank, you mask this part of it, not this part of it. So that is the culture that has sort of prevented them to really adopt a technology that could save their life, particularly in COVID-19, where they thought, hey, masking my lower part of the face would mean that I'm the bad guy or the sick guy. No, I don't want it. Now, wait a minute. That's not logical, and that's not really scientific as well. But the culture has it that they didn't want it. They don't want it, and that's a problem, right? But for the East, well, we're okay with that. And if you look at that from a more ideological point of view or perspective, you can see in the West, they don't mind if you speak up. if you speak out, if you speak up, no problem at all. You just say whatever you want.
Right.
And what they really want is, let's agree on something. So what they really want to hide is what's inside the hearts. So they can tell you they can tell you stuff,
Right.
and they can still have their own privacy inside their hearts. And that's the eyes. So they hide the eyes. But in the East, we're talking about look at places like China. As long as you don't speak, you don't talk, you say, I agree with the government, fine. Even if you put it this way, there are a lot of dissidents in China, right? Political dissidents.
Right.
And what they actually did sort of wrong is that they speak up. They speak out. So what do you have to do in China? You mask your mouth. If you look at that from that kind of perspective. So masking the mouth, it's gonna be safe for people politically. So when they ask you to mask your mouth because of COVID, people say yes, no problem.
Right.
But in the West, why should I mask my mouth? I just want my freedom of speech. So I don't find it a problem. So if you look at that from a more ideological point of view, you will see it's a little bit different. So that difference here. Well, but you know the interesting part is that if you look at the Philippines is in Asia,
Right.
supposed to be in the East, but it's highly influenced by American culture as well. So
Right.
so you basically have both sides of the world.
Right.
Everything is there in the Philippines. So it's just the middle of it. Now, when that happens, you have both sides. So all of a sudden you have even a bigger problem.
Right. The confusion
Right.
is thicker. Right. I agree. But for my understanding, Doc, what are the examples of these cultural differences pertaining to educational technology?
As simple as Zoom. I don't know if you've noticed, but I have classes with foreign students and local students.
Okay.
And whenever I have local classes, the moment I got into Zoom, everybody turns off the microphones.
Okay.
I got into a foreign class, everybody turns on the microphones, and they were speaking as if they were in a big ballroom, in a
Right.
big crowded room. So you can feel the ambience, the atmosphere.
Okay.
So if you look at that, they speak up, they find it okay, and the moment you're in, they would sort of be quiet. Yet the microphones are on.
Are on,
I mean,
okay.
yeah, for foreign students, but for local students or for students coming from large power distance, collectivist countries, they generally turn off the microphones.
Okay.
Of course, there are reasons that are quite reasonable as well. For example, I once had a seminar with a number of Filipinos,
Okay.
and they're not students. Okay, they're not students. And the moment they came in, I realized that everybody turns off the microphones. So I asked, why don't you turn on your microphone? And they said, no, we're at home, and there are roosters here, there are dog barking here. So okay, there's another reason for that. But if you look at students from China, students from Hong Kong, Taiwan, well, there are no roosters, there are no dogs, and even if there are, well, we don't usually keep roosters at home. So they don't have that kind of a problem, but still they will turn off the microphones. So it's that kind of a culture where you get inside a classroom, you don't want people to hear you. Whereas for the West, for Westerners, for Caucasians, they would just come in and they want all the microphones on. If you muted them, they would just turn on the microphones by themselves, and everybody would be there, and they would be chit-chatting with each other. The moment you walk in, you basically walk into just like any other classrooms. You see students talking, you see them chit-chatting.
Yeah.
So different. That is so different. The way they use the same technology is so different. So the moment when I walk into log on to a Zoom classroom with a bunch of Asian students or Chinese students, zero, nothing. Everybody would not turn on their microphones. Nobody turned on their cameras. I log onto a classroom with foreign students. Maybe half of them turn on the cameras, and everybody turned on the microphones, or maybe one or two. But the moment you start talking, they turn on the microphones. Now that's a very, very interesting thing. And of course, there are professors who would say, "I want all your microphones muted." There are people like that. But if you just let them choose, you will realize they sort of wanted to speak up. Interesting. So the way they actually take that use or apply or practice that technology has something to do with their own culture.
Right. That's a good realization. But how do these differences impact us?
Well, just like what I said earlier, look at what happened in the US, UK, and then Italy, for instance. Well, there are good things about the culture, and of course there are bad things. Well, there's nothing, nobody's perfect. So when you have a small power distance, individualist society, where you go into the Zoom classroom, you turn on your microphones, you turn on your cameras. The same thing happened when you go out, you don't wear your face mask.
Right. I'm still getting used to the face mask at this time. Even, I'm still getting used to wearing one myself. Right.
But for them, it would be quite an issue for them to wear the face mask. So you really have to, if you look at that from the legislation point of view, whenever you have a small power distance individualistic country, having stringent laws may not work all the time. Let's say Joe Biden is saying everybody will have to wear a face mask.
Right.
But the problem is with an individualistic society, they decide on their own whether to abide by the law or not. So if they think, no, this is not right, they'll just take off their masks. Whereas in places like China, a high power distance collectivist country, the moment you have stringent laws saying that if you don't wear a face mask, you'll be fined 10,000 Chinese renminbis.
Right.
Everybody wears a face mask.
Right.
Well, but then of course the other way around. If you don't have a very stringent law, everybody would not wear face masks. So it depends on the culture in terms of how they are going to abide by whatever regulations that you're going to set out. And when it comes to public health concerns, these regulations are really so important. So one of the key factors in this is how you're going to impose a regulation in a society. Let's say in a high power distance society, it's easy. But in a small power distance society like the States, the UK, Australia, Australia is doing a very good job actually. Yes. Canada, Italy, Austria. Well, these European countries, they're basically small power distance and individualistic. And you will see that they have lots of these problems simply because, for example, just the other day, I guess it was just last night or maybe the day before, there was a bunch of people where was that? In Italy? I thought it was in Italy, right? Or Spain, who were all charged for holding a party. So try to imagine this. Party? Are you sure? Seriously? Now? No way. I mean, but for them, of course I need a party. I've been here for so long and I'm so bored, I need a party. I don't care if I'm going to be fined. Now, look at the difference between somebody from a culture that is individualistic, whereas somebody from a culture that is collectivistic, they'll say, no, I'm not going to go to the party. So it's a lot easier to sort of impose these sort of regulations in cultures like that.
If this
versus individualists.
Right. I understand that though. But if culture is so ingrained in the fiber of the country, how can we change this? Is there?
Yeah, that's a big problem.
Well,
two things. Either with time. So time can actually change a lot of things.
All right.
Let me just use that example that I had before with people taking pictures back in the 1900s. It took, I think, Chinese like 100 years or probably like 50 years just to find themselves okay in front of the camera.
Right.
Now that is not a problem with the West. So time can change.
Right.
And of course, instead of time, well, the other thing that would also change is education. So you have to let them know what exactly is happening, and they need to be taught this is no ordinary flu. And be responsible. Even if you don't have any symptoms, you can still infect others and things like that. So that boils down to the education part.
Right.
So the two things, time and education. That depends. If you don't have the education thing there, then you probably need the time. But you probably don't want the time thing right now because it's going to take years, if not decades, right? So you don't want that. But rather, if you do the education, then probably better and easier and quicker. So yeah, that's what I think.